Ago, Kilombo Muntu. We are communing with Axosu, Ganlodo Axosu, Agelogbagan, Ago be the first.
Sure.
And we are conducting an interview for all of those out there who are serious about learning about Ganlodo and Vodun and Isheshe and the real culture of African people from a Maroon perspective. This is an opportunity to learn about what we are really about and what real African culture is about. Mm-hmm. For those who have been paying attention to the Axosu's works, it's very easy to see a consistency and a certain train of thought that reflects the ideology of someone who's committed to an African first paradigm and the expression
African only
paradigm. Benny. And we want to make that clear to all of those who are witnessing this video so that there's no mistakes, no misunderstandings. Okay, so that being said, KBAC, the first question I have is, for those who are not clear, there are some people who have the impression that in African culture, there's a lot of corruption within African royalty, in African monarchy.
Right.
And they generalize the corruption and think that African monarchies and African royalty as a whole is suspect, that is to be questioned. Of course, this is an ideological mistake for true Africans to make. But can KBAC explain the function of monarchs in African culture, their function and the distinction between the corruption that we see in many parts of Africa regarding royalty and what their true purpose is supposed to be?
It's kind of simple. The royal institution is the culture. And so those that wear the hats, the crowns, the beaded canes, all of that, are supposed to at all times be the protection and expression of the culture. The problem is what they're expressing. They're expressing non-African values. They're expressing infiltrated corruption in their carrying out their so-called chiefly titles, queen mother titles, and so-called kingly titles. So without the royal, Africans are built different from other people. Without the royal institution, you really don't have African culture. You might have, something that resembles like an Africanized church, like the Sheshe phenomenon that is going on around the world, and particularly in North America. So there, even in that, even though it's a phenomenon, it's not a real respected culture because they don't really respect the kings and the queens, but with the royal institution. Now, not to justify any of this, many of the so-called royals have proven otherwise. They've proven not to be royals in the African sense. And so that's why a lot of people, they like, you know what, forget them kings, forget them queens, forget that. We ain't hearing that. That's a cop-out, because what you should do when you have your culture and you see something wrong, you should probably produce something that can correct that instead of just giving up. That's what the Oyinbo, the Yobo, the Tuba, the Cracker wants you to do. Just give up altogether. While they slip in and mimic you. They come in and mimic you. And then you're mad. This white dude says he's a priest. Oh, this white dude got a beaded cane in his hand. You the same one that said the royal institution is not worth it anymore. And if it's that bad, create you a royal institution. Build a new royal line. Nobody, crickets. Well, we will only hear in relation to something like that.
So, Kabiesi Agelogbagan, Agbogi the First, was legitimately crowned.
Yes, 2010.
As the first Axosu outside of Benin.
That.
So, that means, and once again, if those who are listening to this are properly observing the content of restorationhealing.com, they see that.
And newafricanvodun.com.
And
you will type in that address and it takes you to Kilombo Restoration and Healing.
I should. They see the consistency.
Thanks to Princess Jawuntabu.
I shall. And so, we as African people, particularly those whose ancestors were taken from Africa, were brought here to the West, so-called West. We have an example of one who was fully committed to African culture in its true expression, without any compromise. Why are there still so many people who refuse to accept that truth and deny it? They try to make it. They don't seem to be interested in pursuing that example, in spite of its legitimacy.
They want church. They want mosque. And anything that is too far removed, even though they're claiming to be an African tradition, anything that's too far removed from that church model that they're used to disrupts their very being. So they make sure, consciously or subconsciously, they tap into ancestors that will dominate their thoughts with that church model. And that's why, once again, you see so many so-called temples in African tradition, in America in particular, that really mimic churches. I mean, they meet on Sundays for the most part.
I should. Okay. So, we talk often about the Yoruba role in African culture in the West and how popular that is. We talk often about how people look at the Orisa tradition as a new church. When people are looking for African culture, they have this idea, particularly those, once again, whose ancestors were captured and brought over here. When they're looking for African culture, and they pursue the priests from Africa, the continent itself, and they're not making the connection that Kabeshi just described. It would seem like they were engaging in self-deception.
Right.
Kabeshi already issued the decree that the Yoruba are totally stripped of their authority and their position as ones who have any right to question anything regarding African culture.
Yes.
Why is it still such a focal point for people who are born in the West of African descent? This church ideology that they're so drawn to. what is it that makes them so susceptible to the double standard of recognizing the clear-cut hypocrisy between that and what makes African culture what it is?
Well, we stripped not just the Yoruba, we stripped all of the continentals of any kind of authority, any kind of say-so, any kind of recognition of any of their titles, their priesthoods, or anything they got to say. Outside of, we apologize sincerely for being involved in your ancestors' captivity, and here's some cultural reparations. Cultural reparations, for y'all that don't know what that is, because they don't have a lot of money over there. But cultural reparation would be not charging people $13,000 for initiation, $9,000, $6,000. If you're so happy to see these people when they come over there, because part of the answer to your question is they feel that continental ice is colder than just regular ice.
What does that mean, Kabisi?
Well, ice is ice. Mm-hmm. It's 32 degrees and below in Russia, and it's also that same degree in your refrigerator. However, you feel like you got to get some real ice from Russia or Yoruba land. Right. We hear the comments that people got to get initiated in Yoruba land to get the real ashe, but you just gave up your ashe when you did that. So even if you go to Yoruba land, if they do have ashe, you ain't got none because you just gave it up. So ashe meets ashe. So if they got real ashe, you can't get it because you just gave yours up. Giving up your self-divinity. And so it's the same thing that they do and have done historically with the Oyinbo. But now, the Continentals are the new master in these Negroes' head. They have this guy, and we know him personally. We met him from Yoruba land. They call him the Araba of America. Now, what is Araba? For some of you that don't know, that could care less about Isheshe, but we got to tell you this because many of you watching this may be strictly concerned about Vodun. However, Araba is that is the chief Ifa priest of an area, right? So you have an Araba of Ile Ife, you have an Araba in Ashokbo, you have an Araba in different places, Oyo. So this guy is from Yoruba land, and they say he's the Araba of America. And nobody from America was voted or anything to say this guy was the Araba for the United States of America. However, he has been accepted by the Ashe giving up Black American. Many will not like to be called Black American because they think that because they use a name like Ogun something on a Sunday or a Saturday, but they something else every day of the week, they think they're African. That's a Black American move to give up your ashe and to be a part-time African. So they're calling this guy Araba of the United States of America. Now, personally, it's really like no concern about it. It's kind of like watching a nice comedy. We love comedy. Like watching that unfold. But hey, he's not the Araba of the United States of America. There is no king of America. There's no king of Atlanta. There's no king of Boston, of no Chicago or Alabama or Mobile. None of that. We are Ganlodo Hosu. We are the Hosu of Ganlodo. We're not the king of a state, of a city.
Foreign entity.
Right. It doesn't make sense.
No.
You know, but the religious minded, now they have an Yoruba of America. If they was going to do that, they could have chose one of their own.
Gotcha.
You know, we know one particular chief that could have, if you want to do that, he's born and bred in the South. Why you couldn't do that with him? But you recognizing all this other stuff from the outside. And this our so-called Yoruba deals with the Oyinbo. Oyinbo is the non-African.
Okay, so we have can Captain explain briefly the distinction between the African, the Black American, the Negro, and the nigger, so that those who are watching this clearly understand